Chapter 1. The Unlikely Hero. It was a typical evening in the sprawling cityscape of New Haven, a vast, neon-lit metropolis that stretched far beyond the horizon, its towering buildings jagged like the teeth of some monstrous machine, the hum of airships cutting through the air, the chatter of pedestrians beneath. The ever-present drone of commerce and life was a city that never truly slept. For most people, the blur of movement in this chaotic urban sprawl was a constant reminder of their insignificance, a backdrop to their struggles, hopes, and dreams, many of which would never come true. Yet, amidst the noise, there were those like Jesse Cole who had long ago accepted that they were just small parts in a vast machine that had no time for individuals. He was an ordinary man, working as a mechanic in a small, run-down shop in Sector 8, a district of New Haven known for its poverty, its desperation, and the occasional neon-lit alleyways where deals were made that never saw the light of day. It was the kind of place where people went to hide, to disappear, to start fresh, or to lose everything. Jesse had been living this kind of life for years now. He had no lofty ambitions, no delusions that his life would ever be more than this small corner of the city. He woke up early every day to grease the gears and tighten the bolts of whatever broken-down machines found their way to his workshop. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was honest work, and it paid just enough to keep his head above water. It wasn't a life of excitement or adventure. There were no heroics, no grand moments. His was a life defined by routine, one where he drifted through each day, dealing with the mundane and the ordinary, content in his anonymity. The city, with its ever-blinking lights and impersonal tech, had become a backdrop to the life he lived, one that didn't require him to think too much about the world around him. It was easier that way. But that night, the night he met her, everything changed. Jesse was heading down one of the alleyways behind his shop, his work boots scuffing against the cracked concrete as he made his way toward the nearest dive bar, a small hole-in-the-wall place he frequented when he needed to escape the grime of the streets and the weight of his thoughts. The bar was tucked away in the shadows of a few crumbling buildings, a haven for those who needed to forget or to drown out the noise of a life that had somehow gotten the better of them. The neon sign flickered overhead, advertising cheap drinks and stale air, but to Jesse, it was home, even if only for a few hours. As he neared the entrance, the familiar scent of old beer and sweat greeted him, and for a moment, he felt like he could breathe easy. He wasn't in the mood for conversation tonight, just a drink to take the edge off. But as Jesse was about to open the door, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a flicker of movement in the shadows of the alley across the street. A small figure huddled against the brick wall. It wasn't unusual. New Haven was full of people hiding, keeping to themselves, dodging the gaze of others. But something about the way this person moved made Jesse stop in his tracks. A gut feeling he had learned to trust kicked in, and without thinking, his feet began to carry him toward the figure. As he got closer, he could see it was a woman now, a girl dressed in a tattered, hooded cloak, her face partially hidden beneath a veil of darkness. She was small, maybe barely in her 20s, and from the way she was hunched against the wall, it was clear something was wrong. The faint sound of a struggle came from her direction, a low, pained groan. Without thinking twice, Jesse's instincts took over, and he approached cautiously, his senses alert. He had seen enough in this city to know that not everything was what it seemed, that not everyone out there had good intentions. But as he drew closer, the girl's condition became clearer. Her eyes were wide with fear, her breath ragged, and she was clutching her side, her fingers stained with blood. Her clothes were more than just ragged. They looked foreign, too clean for someone who would end up in a place like this. His gut twisted with the feeling that whatever was happening here was far from simple. "You okay?" Jesse called out, his voice rough, unsure if he was speaking to someone who was even aware of him. The girl flinched but didn't move, her eyes darting around nervously. She tried to speak, but her words came out in a series of shallow gasps. "Please help me." The words were strained, barely audible, but they carried a weight of desperation that Jesse had heard before. Jesse didn't hesitate. His protective instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he approached her cautiously, his hand reaching out to steady her. But as soon as he laid his hand on her shoulder, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him, heavy, deliberate. Jesse's heart rate spiked as he spun around, his mind racing, his body readying for whatever threat was closing in on him. Two men stepped into view from the far end of the alley, their movements purposeful and predatory, their eyes scanning the shadows as if they knew exactly where to look. "You should mind your business, buddy," one of them called out, his voice rough with an edge of threat. His hand was resting near the holster of a weapon, though he didn't yet draw it. The other man, taller and broader, remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he looked Jesse over. Jesse's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was calm, focused. He could tell that these men weren't here to negotiate, they were here to finish something, and it didn't matter to them if Jesse was in the way. He didn't know what had happened to the girl, but he wasn't about to let these assholes get away with whatever it was they had planned. "I'm not looking for trouble," Jesse said, his voice steady, his eyes flicking from one man to the other, sizing them up. He had been in situations like this before. The trick was always to stay calm, not to give away too much. But the girl, she was in no condition to defend herself, and the moment she was mentioned, they would make their move. "Then you should turn around and walk away," the second man said, stepping forward, his hand now resting on his weapon. Jesse could see the arrogance in their eyes. They thought he was just another nobody easy to push around, easy to intimidate. But what they didn't know was that Jesse Cole wasn't the kind of guy to back down, not when someone needed help. "No," Jesse said, his voice low, determined. He had already decided. He wasn't about to leave her here, bleeding and vulnerable. "You need to leave her alone." For a moment, the alley was silent, the tension thick in the air. Then, the first man stepped forward, his hand flying toward his holster. Without thinking, Jesse reacted. He lunged, tackling the man to the ground just as the gun was drawn. The weapon went off with a loud bang, the bullet whizzing past Jesse's ear. But it didn't hit anything important. Jesse was quick, but the man on the ground was strong. They struggled, fists flying, until Jesse saw an opening. He used all his weight to shove the man off, but in the chaos, the second man had already drawn his gun. Jesse didn't even have time to think as the bullet rang out, the searing pain ripping through his side. His breath caught in his throat as the world around him blurred. He stumbled back, unable to stay on his feet, his vision darkening. His hand instinctively went to the wound, but it was no use. Blood was already soaking through his shirt. Through the haze of pain, he saw the girl, her eyes wide, her body frozen in shock. "You idiot," she whispered, but her voice was barely a sound above the background noise of the alley. Jesse tried to speak, to say something, anything, but his vision blurred further, and the pain grew unbearable. Before he collapsed, he heard the men running off, disappearing into the shadows, their mission complete. He didn't know what it was they wanted, who they were, or why they had been after the girl, but in that moment, none of that mattered. He had done what he could, and if this was the end, at least he had done something right. The world faded in and out, Jesse's vision swimming between patches of darkness and sharp bursts of light as his body reeled from the bullet wound. His limbs felt heavy, every breath a struggle, as if his lungs were filled with fire. He could hear the distant sound of sirens, the low hum of the city pressing in from all sides, but it was the voice, soft, urgent, and unfamiliar, that kept pulling him back. "Stay with me," the girl's voice pleaded, her fingers pressing firmly against his wound in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. "You can't die. Not now." Jesse groaned, his eyes fluttering open just enough to see her hovering over him, her hood pushed back to reveal delicate, almost ethereal features. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim alley light, a soft shade of violet that no human should have. It hit him then something was off, more than off. Her skin, smooth and pale with an almost silvery sheen, looked too flawless, too unblemished, despite the grime of the city around her. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. "You're not from around here, are you?" Jesse rasped, his voice weak but tinged with something close to amusement. The girl flinched, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she redoubled her efforts, tearing a piece of fabric from her cloak and pressing it tightly against his wound. "Not now," she muttered. "Just hold on." Jesse wanted to tell her it was a lost cause. The pain was pulling him under, the darkness clawing at the edges of his mind. He had done what he could, and if this was the end, so be it. He had never imagined dying in an alley protecting a stranger, much less an alien. But there were worse ways to go. At least he had done something. Then, Everything went black. Chapter 2. The Truth Unveiled. The first thing Jesse noticed when he woke was the absence of pain. The throbbing, burning agony in his side was gone, replaced by a dull ache that felt distant, almost muted. The second thing he noticed was that he wasn't in the alley anymore. The ceiling above him was smooth, metallic, and glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The air smelled different, clean, almost too clean, like fresh rain before it hit the earth. He tried to move, but his body felt strangely light, almost weightless. When he turned his head, he saw her. The girl, no, the alien, stood a few feet away, her cloak discarded to reveal a form-fitting suit made of some shimmering material that seemed to shift with every movement. Her hair, silver and slightly luminescent, cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes, still that striking shade of violet, studied him carefully. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice filled with relief. Jesse groaned, pushing himself up on his elbows. "That depends. Am I dead?" A small, amused smile ghosted across her lips. "No, but you were close." Jesse exhaled, dragging a hand over his face. "So, where am I?" He glanced around, taking in the sleek walls and the unfamiliar symbols etched into the panels. "And more importantly, who the hell are you?" The girl hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer, her expression unreadable. "My name is Alara," she said finally, "and this is my ship." Jesse blinked. "Your ship?" Alara nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "I'm not from Earth. I assume you've already figured that out?" "Yeah," Jesse muttered, still processing. The glowing eyes were a bit of a giveaway. He winced slightly as he shifted in the bed. "And my wound?" "You were lucky," Alara said. "The bullet didn't hit anything vital, but you were bleeding out fast. I used a medical stasis field to accelerate your healing." Jesse frowned, glancing down at his side. His shirt was gone, replaced by a thin, smooth band wrapped around his torso, emitting a faint, soothing warmth. He touched it gingerly and felt no pain. Whatever technology she had used, it worked like a miracle. "Okay," he said, exhaling. "So, you're an alien. You have a spaceship, and you saved my life." He glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "Mind telling me why those guys were after you?" Alara's expression darkened. She turned away slightly, as if gathering her thoughts, before finally speaking. "Because I'm not just an alien," she admitted. "I'm a princess." Jesse stared at her. "A princess?" he repeated, his tone flat. "Yes," Alara confirmed, facing him again. "I'm the heir to the throne of the Valari Empire. And those men who attacked me, they were sent to capture me." Jesse let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Of course. I take a bullet for a stranger, and it turns out she's royalty. My luck is fantastic." Alara gave him a look that was almost apologetic. "I didn't mean for you to get involved. You saved my life. I owe you a great debt." Jesse rubbed his temples. "Let's just say I wasn't planning on getting shot today, but here we are." He dropped his hand and studied her. "All right, princess. Why exactly are people trying to capture you?" Alara hesitated, then sighed. "My father, the Emperor, was recently assassinated. There's a power struggle in my empire, and my uncle who believes he should rule wants me eliminated. He sent hunters across the galaxy to find me before I can reach my allies and reclaim my birthright." Jesse let that sink in. He had dealt with a lot of problems in his life: broken engines, overdue rent, the occasional bar fight, but galactic royal conspiracies were new territory. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "Your uncle wants you dead. He sent assassins to Earth to take you out before you can stop him. And now I'm involved in all of this because I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time?" Alara met his gaze. "I won't force you into anything," she said. "I can take you back to your city. You can go back to your life, and I'll ensure you're compensated for your trouble." Jesse exhaled and looked around the ship again, taking in the sheer impossibility of what was happening. A part of him wanted to accept her offer, to go back to his quiet life, forget all of this and pretend it never happened. But another part of him, the part that had acted without thinking when he saw her bleeding in that alley, knew he couldn't just walk away. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's not really my style." Alara blinked, surprised. "You're staying?" Jesse shrugged. "Well, I already got shot for you. Might as well see how this story ends. Alara stared at him for a moment before a slow, genuine smile curved her lips. You're an unusual human, Jessie Cole. Yeah, well, Jessie smirked. You're an unusual princess. Alara chuckled softly, then straightened. We need to leave soon. My uncle's forces will track my ship eventually. If you're coming with me, then we need to move fast. Jessie pushed himself up and stretched, wincing slightly. Guess that means I'm going on my first intergalactic road trip, huh? Alara nodded, stepping toward the ship's controls. Buckle up. This is just the beginning. As the ship's engines roared to life, Jessie realized that his quiet life was officially over. And strangely, he was okay with that. Jessie sat in the cockpit of Alara's ship, watching as the displays flickered with alien symbols and readouts he couldn't begin to understand. The hum of the engines beneath him was smoother than any human-made craft he'd ever encountered, a subtle, constant vibration that felt almost alive. The control panel was sleek, glowing softly under Alara's fingertips as she worked with quiet efficiency, adjusting their course and engaging what he could only assume was the ship's defense system. He exhaled slowly, still wrapping his head around everything. Less than an hour ago, he had been shot in a grimy alleyway protecting a woman he thought was just another victim in the city's brutal underworld. Now, he was sitting on an alien spaceship next to a princess on the run from intergalactic assassins. His life had officially taken a turn for the surreal. Alara's fingers moved deftly over the console, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the interface. Despite the danger they were in, she looked composed, regal. Even though Jessie could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness in her jaw. She might have been trained for moments like this, but she was still scared. So, Jessie said, leaning back in his seat, you've got assassins after you. Your uncle wants you dead, and your only plan is to keep running until you find allies? Alara didn't look up, her violet eyes scanning the monitors. I have a rendezvous point, she said. There's a resistance movement loyal to my family. If I can reach them, I can reclaim my throne. Jessie raised an eyebrow. And what happens if we don't reach them? Alara hesitated for half a second before answering. Then my uncle consolidates power, declares himself emperor, and my people suffer under his rule. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. And I probably don't live long enough to worry about it. Jessie let out a low whistle. Damn, that's a hell of a mess. Alara smirked faintly. You didn't have to get involved, you know? Jessie shrugged. Yeah, well, it's too late for second thoughts now. He tapped his fingers against the armrest. Besides, if I went back to my old life, what would I even say? Hey, I got shot saving an alien princess, but I decided to call it quits and go back to fixing broken-down engines. Alara's smile widened, just a little. I appreciate your unique sense of duty. Jessie grinned. Hey, if I'm gonna throw my life into chaos, might as well do it for royalty. Alara's amusement was short-lived. The ship's console beeped sharply, and her expression turned serious. She straightened, her hands flying over the controls. What is it? Jessie asked, sitting up. Alara's eyes narrowed. We have company. Jessie's stomach twisted as the viewport displayed a zoomed-in image of what was following them. Several sleek, black ships were emerging from hyperspace, forming a tight pursuit formation. Their hulls were marked with an emblem that looked like a jagged crown, glowing red against the dark void of space. Alara cursed under her breath. My uncle's enforcers. Jessie tensed. How the hell did they find us so fast? They must have tracked my ship's signature, Alara said, fingers working frantically on the console. I was hoping to mask it long enough to escape undetected, but I underestimated their reach. The ship rocked as the first shots were fired. Jessie grabbed the sides of his seat as alarms flared throughout the cockpit. Alara's expression remained calm, but there was a fire in her eyes now, a determination that Jessie couldn't help but admire. They're not here to negotiate, she said grimly. Hold on. Jessie barely had time to brace himself before the ship banked hard to the right, dodging another barrage of laser fire. The stars outside blurred as Alara twisted and turned through space, her hands moving with precise, practiced control. The enemy ships were faster than Jessie had hoped, staying on their tail, their weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly accuracy. Do we have weapons? Jessie asked, gripping the console. Alara pressed a sequence of buttons, and 2 pulse cannons slid out from the ship's hull. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "But we're outnumbered, and they have heavier firepower. If we fight, we'll be destroyed." Jesse frowned. "So, what's the plan?" Alara's eyes flickered toward him for a brief moment. "We run." She hit another control, and suddenly the ship lurched forward with a massive burst of speed. The enemy fighters adjusted their course, but they were just a fraction of a second too slow. Alara's ship wove through the debris of an abandoned asteroid field, using the jagged rocks for cover. The enemy ships pursued, but the narrow passages forced them to break formation. Jesse clenched his fists, watching as Alara executed maneuver after maneuver with near-perfect precision. He wasn't sure how, but he could tell she had done this before. "You've flown like this before," he said. Alara didn't look away from the controls. "I was trained in evasive piloting," she said. "It was part of my royal education." Jesse smirked. "Remind me not to bet against you in a race." Alara allowed herself a small smile before focusing back on the fight. The enemy ships were closing in again, having adjusted their formation. One of them fired a missile, and Alara barely had time to react. "Hold on," she shouted. The ship spun in an impossible spiral, the missile grazing just past their engines. The explosion sent shockwaves through the asteroid field, scattering debris in every direction. Jesse winced. That was way too close. Alara's hands flew over the controls. "One more push," she murmured. "I just need dash." Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered. The power levels dipped, and the warning alarms blared louder than before. "What now?" Jesse demanded. Alara's face was pale. "They hit our hyperdrive. We can't jump to FDL." Jesse swore under his breath. "Fantastic. Any other bad news?" Alara's jaw tightened. "We have one chance left." She pulled the ship into a sharp descent, diving toward the surface of a planet below them. Jesse's stomach turned as they entered the atmosphere at breakneck speed, the hull glowing red-hot from the friction. "You're gonna land us on that?" he yelled. Alara didn't answer. She was completely focused now, her hands steady on the controls. The planet below was a mix of jagged mountains and thick forests, a wild, untamed world that looked just as likely to kill them as their pursuers. Jesse barely had time to react before the ship crashed through the thick foliage, branches and vines scraping against the hull as they descended rapidly. Alara fought against the controls, stabilizing the landing just enough to keep them from being torn apart. With one final, jarring impact, the ship slammed into the ground, skidding to a stop in the dense jungle. Smoke curled from the damaged engines, and the alarms finally went silent. Jesse groaned, unbuckling his harness. "I hate landings." Alara was already scanning the readings. "They'll come looking for us." She turned to Jesse. "We need to move." Jesse took a deep breath, staring at the alien jungle outside the viewport. He had no idea what was out there, but one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. Jesse groaned as he pushed himself up from his seat, his body still aching from the bullet wound, the crash landing, and the sheer insanity of the last few hours. Smoke curled from the consoles, and the faint scent of burning wires filled the air. The ship was in bad shape, but they were alive for now. He glanced at Alara, who was already at the controls, her fingers rapidly pressing sequences of buttons as she tried to assess the damage. "How bad is it?" Jesse asked, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Alara's violet eyes flickered with frustration as she checked the damage report. "Not good," she admitted. "The hyperdrive is completely shot, and atmospheric thrusters are barely holding together. We won't be flying anytime soon." Jesse let out a breath. "Great. So we're stranded on an alien jungle planet with assassins hot on our trail." He gave her a sideways glance. "Got any more good news?" Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Our pursuers will be here soon. They won't give up that easily." She glanced toward the viewport, where the dense jungle canopy loomed beyond the cracked glass. The world outside was wild, untamed, a tangle of massive trees, glowing flora, and distant sounds that hinted at things that were better left unseen. Jesse stepped up beside her, staring at the alien wilderness. "So, we're sitting ducks unless we move." Alara nodded, already grabbing a small pack of supplies from a hidden compartment beneath the floor panels. "We have to put as much distance between us and the ship as possible. If we stay here, They'll find us. Jesse didn't argue. He knew enough about survival to understand that staying in one place while being hunted was a death sentence. With a final glance at the damaged ship, he grabbed a utility belt and slung it over his shoulder. "All right, princess. Lead the way." Alara shot him a look but didn't comment. She moved swiftly, opening the hatch with a hiss of depressurization, and the two of them stepped out onto the jungle floor. The heat hit Jesse immediately. The air was thick with moisture, the scent of damp earth and alien flora surrounding them. The bioluminescent glow from the strange plants cast eerie shadows, their tendrils pulsing faintly as if alive. The ground beneath them was soft but firm, covered in thick moss that muffled their footsteps. "We need to move fast," Alara said, her voice low. "They'll be scanning for heat signatures." Jesse followed her lead, keeping his eyes and ears open as they moved deeper into the jungle. The sounds of unknown creatures echoed through the trees, a mixture of clicks, growls, and distant screeches. Jesse had been in a lot of bad situations before, but this was something else. "How long do we have before they find the ship?" Jesse asked, his eyes scanning the dense foliage around them. "Minutes," Alara said, her tone grim. "They'll check the wreckage first, but once they see we're not there, they'll start tracking us." Jesse exhaled sharply. "Fantastic." They moved quickly, weaving through the thick vegetation, ducking beneath low-hanging branches that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Every step forward took them deeper into unfamiliar terrain, but it also put distance between them and the incoming hunters. Then, a distant explosion rattled the ground. Jesse glanced back, his pulse spiking. "I'm guessing that was our ship?" Alara's expression was grim. "They destroyed it to make sure we couldn't use it." Jesse muttered a curse. "They really want you dead?" "They want me erased," Alara corrected. "If my uncle consolidates power, my very existence is a threat to his rule." Jesse nodded, his grip tightening on the makeshift weapon he had salvaged from the ship, a compact energy pistol, still warm from the crash. "Then we make sure you stay very much alive." Alara's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before she turned forward again. "We have to keep moving." The jungle grew thicker as they pressed on, the alien sounds becoming a constant backdrop to their hurried escape. But then, just as Jesse was about to ask how much farther they needed to go, Alara suddenly stopped. Jesse almost bumped into her. "What dash?" Alara held up a hand, her body tense. "They're here." Jesse's breath caught in his throat. He listened carefully, straining his ears past the ambient noise of the jungle. And then he heard it low. Mechanical clicks, the sound of something scanning, searching. Drones. Alara grabbed Jesse's wrist and pulled him down behind the thick roots of an enormous tree. The canopy above was dense, but not enough to completely block the sky. Through the gaps in the foliage, Jesse saw them, sleek black drones with glowing red optics, hovering silently, scanning the ground below. Jesse clenched his jaw. "How do we get past them?" Alara reached into her pack and pulled out a small, spherical device. "EMP pulse. It'll knock them offline, but only for a few seconds." Jesse nodded. "Then we better make those seconds count." Alara pressed the device against the tree root, activating it. A low hum filled the air, and then silence. The drones flickered, their optics dimming as they lost power. "Go," Alara whispered. They sprinted through the jungle, ducking beneath branches, leaping over roots, their movements fast and precise. Jesse's heart pounded as they pushed forward, knowing that the drones would be back online at any moment. Then gunfire. A burst of energy bolts seared past them, striking the trees with sizzling force. Jesse cursed, diving behind cover as Alara did the same. "Guess they found us." Alara pulled out her own weapon, a sleek, curved sidearm that glowed with violet energy. "We need to get to higher ground." Jesse peeked out from behind the tree, spotting the enemy soldiers emerging from the jungle. Their armor was black and segmented, their visors glowing red. They moved with precision, their weapons raised. "We're outnumbered," Jesse muttered. "Got a plan?" Alara exhaled, eyes scanning their surroundings. "Yes, but you're not going to like it." Jesse chuckled dryly. "Princess, I stopped liking things when I got shot for you." Alara smirked, then pointed toward a massive ravine just ahead. "We jump." Jesse stared at her. "Are you insane?" Alara didn't answer. She simply grabbed his wrist and jumped. Jesse barely had time to yell before they plummeted into the unknown. Chapter 4. The Final Stand. The freefall was disorienting. The wind rushed past Jesse's ears as they plunged into the ravine, the world spinning around him. Just as he thought they were about to hit the ground, Alara pressed a button on her wrist device, and a sudden pulse of energy slowed their descent. They landed hard but safely on a rocky outcrop deep within the canyon. Jesse gasped, steadying himself. "Warn me next time, would you?" Alara was already moving. "Come on. There's a hidden base in this canyon. If we reach it, we can call for help." Jesse groaned but followed. The sound of pursuit echoed above the enemy forces rappelling down the canyon walls. They ran. Blaster fire rained down from above. Jesse fired back, taking out 2 soldiers with precise shots. Alara moved like a blur, dodging and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Then, just as they neared the entrance to an ancient-looking structure carved into the rock, the enemy commander stepped forward, a towering figure in sleek black armor. Alara froze. "Varos," she whispered. Jesse aimed his weapon. "Who's this guy?" "My uncle's enforcer," Alara said, her voice tight. Varos smirked beneath his visor. "The princess and her pet human. How quaint." Jesse narrowed his eyes. "You talk too much." Then, the fight truly began. The battle was fierce. Jesse and Alara fought side by side, their movements perfectly in sync. Blaster fire lit up the canyon as Varos advanced, his blade crackling with energy. Then Alara struck. With a final, precise shot, she disabled Varos's armor. Jesse tackled him, knocking him unconscious. Panting, Jesse turned to Alara. "We did it." Alara smiled. "We did." As the resistance ships arrived, securing their escape, Jesse knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. And, surprisingly, he was okay with that. Jesse wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing hard as the dust settled around them. The towering figure of Varos, the enforcer of Alara's uncle, lay motionless on the rocky ground, his sleek black armor scorched and his energy blade flickering weakly in the dirt. Jesse's knuckles ached from where he had landed his final punch, and his chest rose and fell rapidly as he processed the chaos of the last few minutes. The battle had been intense, the air thick with the scent of scorched rock and ionized plasma, but against all odds, they had won. Alara stood beside him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her violet eyes burned with fierce determination, her weapon still raised as she studied the unconscious enforcer. For the first time since they had crash-landed, she allowed herself a moment of stillness. "We need to go," she finally said, her voice quiet but urgent. Jesse glanced at her. "Yeah, no argument there. But what about him?" He jerked his head toward Varos. Alara hesitated for a fraction of a second before kneeling beside the fallen warrior. She pressed a device to his wrist, activating a containment field that bound his limbs with glowing restraints. "We leave him," she said, standing up. "He won't be able to follow us, and his men won't risk staying on this planet much longer. The resistance is on its way." Jesse exhaled, relieved that they wouldn't have to deal with Varos again anytime soon. "Then let's not waste time." The canyon walls loomed high above them, their jagged peaks catching the light of the distant sun. The alien jungle beyond was eerily silent now, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Jesse followed Alara as she led the way toward the entrance of an ancient structure hidden deep within the rock face. The entrance was marked with strange carvings, symbols that glowed faintly under Alara's touch. "This place, what is it?" Jesse asked, glancing at the massive stone doorway as it slowly slid open with a low, rumbling sound. "A remnant of my people's past," Alara murmured, stepping inside. "A safe house, hidden away for times of crisis." Jesse followed, his boots echoing against the smooth stone floor. The interior was vast, lined with ancient technology. Consoles flickered to life as they entered, revealing a command center that had been abandoned for centuries. Dust floated in the dim light, but the structure itself remained intact, as if waiting for her return. "This will do," Alara said, moving to one of the control panels. "I can send a transmission from here." Jesse leaned against a nearby console, watching her work. "So, what now?" Alara paused, her fingers hovering over the interface. Now, I call my allies. The resistance fleet is waiting for my signal. Once they arrive, we regroup, and we take the fight to my uncle. Jesse studied her for a moment. She was exhausted. He could see it in the way her shoulders sagged ever so slightly, in the faint tremor in her hands. She had been running for so long, carrying the weight of an empire on her shoulders. But now, for the first time, there was something else in her expression. Hope. You really think you can win? Jesse asked, crossing his arms. Alara met his gaze, a small smile tugging at her lips. With the right people by my side? Yes. Jesse chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Guess that means I'm stuck with you, huh? Alara arched an eyebrow. I did offer to take you back to your normal life, you know? Jesse scoffed. Normal life? Yeah, I think I passed that exit a long time ago. He exhaled, shaking his head. Besides, someone's gotta make sure you don't get yourself killed. Alara's smile widened, genuine this time. Then welcome to the rebellion, Jesse Cole. Before Jesse could respond, the communication console chimed, and a voice crackled through the speakers. Princess Alara, we received your signal. The fleet is en route to your location. Hold tight. Alara let out a breath she had been holding, her eyes shining with renewed determination. Copy that. We'll be ready. Jesse straightened, feeling a strange but undeniable sense of purpose settle over him. He had started this journey as a nobody, a mechanic in the backstreets of a city that barely noticed his existence. Now, he was standing beside an alien princess, about to fight in a war that could shape the fate of an entire empire. And for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. As the sound of approaching ships filled the air, Jesse turned to Alara with a smirk. Guess I should start getting used to this whole hero thing. Alara chuckled. You're off to a good start. The battle for the empire had only just begun.